Hi, my name is Ricardo, and I scored a 770 on the GMAT after using Target Test Prep to prepare for the test. A little bit about myself. I currently work at a hedge fund in operations as a manager, and prior to that, I was actually a teacher. So I have a pretty unusual background to be working in finance in general, but part of that is why I want to go to business school and had to take the GMAT in the first place. So I decided to apply to business school toward the beginning of 2023. And I started my GMAT prep in March, really by asking some friends who had recently gone to business school what they did to prepare for the GMAT, knowing full well that it was a pretty big test that had a lot of material on it. One of them thankfully suggested TTP. He spoke very, very highly of it, said it was pretty daunting in a way, just the amount of material that it covers, but he said it was very, very helpful for him in terms of preparation for the test. So I took a look at it and I bit the bullet and I went for it. I hadn't really done any work to prepare for the GMAT before I started TTP, so I was a very blank slate going into it. I didn't do any mock tests beforehand, but on the TTP diagnostic, I did pretty poorly on the quant and I did okay on the verbal. Thankfully, my teaching background helped me out quite a bit on that, but I still had plenty of work to do, a lot of wood to chop. But after working my way through the whole course over several months, I did manage to score a 770 on the test, which was broken down as a 50 quant and 47 verbal. I did 3 to 4 months working through all the lessons and tests, taking a couple hours after work each day and taking a lot of time on the weekends to go over it. And then, I finally felt ready to schedule a test. I took that at the end of July, scored 770, so pretty happy with that, especially given where I started. And I'd say I probably used it for about 4.5 months total. In terms of how TTP helped me with preparation and helped me achieve my score, I cannot overstate how useful and instrumental it was. Just working my way through the whole program. It is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to get through all of it because there's a huge breadth and depth to the course, but that's exactly what makes it so valuable. TTP really covers every single thing that's on the GMAT, front and back, and it builds up from very, very basic blocks for each topic just to make sure that you understand not just how things work, but how the GMAT wants you to think about them. To be honest, as a former English teacher, I disagreed with some of the phrasings and the word order that's considered correct for the test. But yeah, Target Test Prep walked me through exactly what the GMAT considers right for the test and why, which was pretty important and a pretty key component of why I did so well on the verbal. The same thing goes for the quant section, where TTP will, it will start out with a very basic level, properties of numbers and things like that. Once you've done a lot of work with that, you start working through the rest of the material. But it's the same story. Start at a basic level, build up your understanding, and test the knowledge. And I think the step-by-step solutions and video guides for all the practice problems were really, really helpful, particularly if something didn't make sense. It did a good job of showing me where I went wrong and how to approach the problems differently than I would have initially thought. I would also say there were a couple of what I thought were underrated parts of the program that were pretty helpful. The global review tests that were intermittent throughout the rest of the program were pretty helpful given the amount of material that had to cover. It was pretty useful in making sure that you went back and reviewed some of the older stuff so that it still stayed fresh in your mind. As I mentioned, this is a process that took several months. So, it's pretty easy to forget some of the original stuff that you were going over, but TTP did a good job referring back to the initial material and interspersing that with the newer stuff that we needed to cover. The other thing that I found very helpful, and I think TTP needs to highlight this a little more, is the personal analytics section, which shows exactly what types of problems I was having trouble on by showing a breakdown of the sections and the subsections and how I was scoring on the practice problems related to them. That combined with the error tracker really helped me hone in on my weakest areas so that I could improve on them before test day. Just a little bit of personal advice in terms of how to approach the program. Make sure that you're as fresh mentally as possible when you're working through this stuff and just for the test in general. It's not always easy to do that after a long work day, but spending, an hour or two after work, but then really diving in on the weekends, it's pretty effective way to make sure that you're getting the most out of this material. You aren't doing yourself any favors if you're totally exhausted when you start studying, or it won't really be all that productive. You'll just be going through the motions, which is exactly what the entire course helps you avoid, through the repetition and depth of the material. All said and done, TTP was a lot of work, but I would say that every part of it was well worth it. I'm really glad that my friend recommended it to me, and I'm really, really satisfied with the results, and I hope that other people have the same experience.